Welcome back everybody for another PoE2 video. This one is a build showcase of our cast on Ignite Witch. Now I say Witch even though I've ascended bloodmage because quite honestly this is possible with any ascendancy. So just to showcase that, right now we've unspec'd everything except for the 3% increased life on our witch. The reason we've unspec'd everything on bloodmage is because our life cost on skills gets out of hand with the way we're playing this. And without something like leech to kind of sustain that, this really isn't viable with a life cost. So they are working on leech. Hopefully it gets fixed. When it gets fixed, I think this will be really nice on the blood mage, but for now this is just a generic witch build that will work way better on Infernalist or Storm Weaver, both of which have incredible mana ascendancies, so will work really well with this build because they might be able to better sustain the mana than the blood mage does right now. Okay, so getting into the build, what's going on is we have a cast on Ignite setup, or several cast on Ignite setups. So the way we're playing this is we have 3 cast on Ignites. We have 1 which is the way we're triggering a lot of these things, which is Hypothermia, Burning Inscription, and Spell Cascade. This lays down a curse that lowers their cold resistance, which is a great setup for Comet, and it has Burning Inscription, which creates Ignited Ground, which helps trigger our cast on Ignite loop. Now, it is worth noting that this is not an entirely self-sufficient process. You will run out of mana, you will have to trigger this more. So in order to trigger it in the beginning and to continue to trigger it, we're going to be using Flame Wall and Solar Orb. We have Fireball here. I don't use it almost ever, but it's there if you really want to try it out. So Flame Wall, Solar Orb, and then our mana will be pretty much gone instantly. Now, it is worth noting that this might be changed so that the trigger of this will no longer work with Cast on Ignite, because something very similar to that was done with Summon Raging Spirits. If that happens, you can self-cast Hypothermia with Burning Inscription and Spell Cascade and get very similar results. So if that happens, self-cast it. I've got a clip of me self-casting it in a fight with a rare. It works very similarly. Basically you just lay down your Solar Orb and Flame Wall, or one or the other, you don't really need both, and then continuously cast Hypothermia to get your cast on Ignites to go off. Essentially what this playstyle boils down to is you are going to spend a lot of mana all the time. So if we look over here, you can see that our Frostbite is 172 mana, and our Comet, even with Inspiration support, is 119 mana. We also have Spark going off, which is 39 mana, and it's going off way more often than either of these. The most important part, and the reason we're using Spark here, is Spark has a 9% base crit chance. And you might be thinking, well, why is that important if it's not Comet? Comet's doing all your damage. Yes, but we want to crit very often. The reason we want to crit very often is Arcane Surge. So we have a total 20% chance to gain Arcane Surge when we deal a critical hit. So we want to crit as much as possible because this build eats mana. Just absolutely destroys it. We use a lot of mana, we use it very quickly. So a lot of our tree is dedicated to mana sustain. So you look here, essentially what we're doing is we're stacking intelligence and strength because we want the health and we want the mana, and we have to meet the requirements for all of our skills and equipment. All of our equipment is armor ES hybrid bases. You can go full armor bases. If you do that, drop Eldrich Battery, because Eldrich Battery is just there to add base mana so that our mana regeneration is more effective. Alright, so starting off in the tree, we're going spell and minion damage as our first node, and then straight into intelligence and strength. And we're going raw destruction for a little extra damage, and then in the beginning we're gonna go up here and go into exploit the elements for some early damage. From there we can come back down, grab some more strength, grab some more int, and grab devoted protector, Resilient Soul, and Relentless Vindicator. All of these are pretty good nodes, and having some life recovery is always nice. It's even more important if you're going Blood Mage, as eventually this is going to be a very important resource. Whenever you can, grab the mana over here just for some extra mana sustain, and then we're going to go all the way up into Endless Blizzard and probably Glaciation for, again, early damage. We don't need Stormbreaker quite yet, but we're going to go over and start grabbing either this or this, and that's going to be more elemental damage or Touch of the Arcane, which is going to give us 10% chance to gain Arcane Surge when we critically strike. It's very important. Come down here, even more mana sustain, and then we're going to go over here for more crit, more intelligence, and way more mana sustain. So, all of this put together, also grab the mana sustain here, and the crit here and here. So all of this put together means that we have pretty generic elemental damage, crit chance, crit bonus, and mana sustain. So we have all of this mana sustain because we are going to drain our mana incredibly quickly. So we want as much regen as we can so that we can get mana back fast enough to be able to try and cast skills. You will still run out of mana. You will still struggle to maintain mana, so you're going to have to kickstart that loop pretty regularly. One next step we could take is going over here for Energize, as that would increase the rate at which we're triggering our skills. The reason we haven't done that yet is because right now we're having trouble sustaining our mana. If you're playing another Ascendancy, that might be easier. Stormweaver has constant Arcane Surge, which is going to be huge for mana regen, so maybe you can sustain this. And Infernalist has mana stacking that they can get through the life reservation. And so, because you have a bigger mana pool, then you can have more mana regeneration, and your mana regen is going to be more effective overall. Later on for Blood Mage, once Life Leech gets fixed, maybe we go over here and grab Blood Magic. That assumes that we can sustain all of these costs, so we'll have to play around with it and see what works best for Blood Mage. But right now, that's the concept, that's the build. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Really just needs some basic equipment. Our equipment is nothing special. We've got some gain as extra on our wand. No spell levels. Cold spell levels will probably be way better than gain as extra, but gain as extra is what we currently have. Our equipment is majority life, resistances, strength, and int. Those are the things that we want to go for. Good armor ES bases are a priority because we like the armor for our own defensiveness. We like the ES because it's base mana. I've got an okay belt that I got off trade, and then I got these boots hoping that they would help with the cast on Ignite. They do not, so these are unnecessary. Right now they're just good movement speed, life, and a little bit of resists, so I'm keeping them on, but they are unnecessary entirely. Right now we have an Omen Scepter that's giving us Malice, which is really great for getting our crits more often. And so we do want this, but I do need to replace this because we want a, number one, a higher level Malice, and number two, a better overall Scepter, because the only thing that's really doing anything for us here is the Spirit. So we need at least increased Spirit 40% in order to sustain the current Spirit reservations we have, and I don't really want to drop anything, so that's the goal. We have an okay amulet with no resists, which I need to replace and get some resists. We have an awful ring that has 2 resists, so I haven't been able to replace it. And we've got an okay prismatic ring, which is, again, has a little bit of resists, has some strength, and has some life. And so this has been hard to replace as well. So, all of our gear needs to be updated. None of it needs to stay. All of it needs upgrades or can be upgraded. Again, focus on life, resistances, mana, strength, and int, where you can't get life or mana. As for runes, same deal. Focus on life or mana, or resists, prioritize resists over life or mana, and then whichever you feel comfortable with for life or mana after that. We will not be going mind over matter on this build because we cannot sustain the less recovery rate. We also are going to be using all of our mana nearly instantly all the time, so this doesn't give us any defensive layers, it's only a negative. Now, if you've been following along with this build over the past couple of days from league start, then you'll know that the original intent was to go cast on crit FireStorm. You might be wondering, where did that go? Well, cast on crit didn't feel really great to me, and FireStorm wasn't critting enough or wasn't hitting enough to sustain itself. So unfortunately, what we wanted to do wasn't going to work out. Also, we did discover that triggered skills do not contribute to meta skills, so you cannot have a skill cast on crit itself. Makes sense, but unfortunate. So I didn't love the way that self-casting something to crit enough to trigger a spell felt, so I tried to figure out another way to do that. And here we are. This is the second map that I ran in the end game at all. It's got a map boss, it's got an essence monster. I just wanted to show how the build played in its current state. I really like it. Again, my defenses are sorely lacking. A lot of work needs to go into my gear currently, and there's a long way to go there. Alright, here we go. Now, I have no idea if I'm going to be able to beat this boss, just based on I have not faced a map boss before. So I have no idea how scary they are. But again, build feels pretty good. The defenses are not there yet. Ooh. I think the only reason I'm surviving right now is because I've got a fair amount of health. Hopefully that can keep me going. Ooh. Okay, we got it. Ooh. And we got a divine out of this map. In the description below is a link to the Maxroll guide that I've written up for this. There aren't a whole lot of notes. I don't have an atlas tree, and the class is set to just a witch, because I think either ascendancy will work for this. I also think that a sorceress can do this very, very easily, but I don't know what the beginning of the tree looks like for them, so I didn't want to set up a guide for them yet. This is the gear that I currently have. Again, nothing wild here. Almost all of this needs to be replaced. The belt is the only thing that I think is probably worth keeping. Check it out if you would like to. Let me know what you think of the build, and let me know what build ideas you've been working on. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.